Before we begin our conversation, one of the greatest ways to show gratitude for any blessing that Allah has given you, including the great blessing of having the opportunity to be here and to partake in these lectures, and to collectively, all of us together, raise our voices in the azah of Abu Abdullah, is the recitation of salawat. For all of those groups that were mentioned, and all of those of you who have given sacrifices from your time and your energy and your services and your patience, let's collectively recite 3 loud salawat in appreciation for the effort. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Rahimallahu man yaqra'a suratul Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقل ربي زدني علما صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد. Your second salawat of love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Your loudest of salawat as condolences to Master of our time over the musibah of his mother Zainab. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected elders, scholars, brothers and sisters, أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا لأهل البيت عليهم السلام. In our discussion around this topic of application of faith, we've addressed a number of different ways of understanding and how we can put in some practical effects of applying the concept of faith in day-to-day life, of how to look at ourselves in a perspective that's an acknowledgement of not just the physical presence that we have, but also the spiritual presence. How it is to develop and rationalize the infrastructure of when we make a decision that materially it may not be significant in the apparent nature of society, that it may not follow the rules of society, we may not share the priorities of the society at large that we live in, but that in living in this environment, we have to be consistently reminded of the fact that we don't live simply a material world, but rather we have a goal that we are preparing for. One of the aspects that's important to remember in how to continue this process of development, of continuing to learn to apply your faith in your day-to-day life, is continuing the process of education. It's continuing that process of learning about our faith in Islam. You know, when we take a look at ourselves as professionals in a society, we take a look and we see that as professionals in society, there are various professions that we deem so significant and so important that to continue to remain a practicing member of that profession, you have to continuously demonstrate your continuing education. You have to take continuous courses or pass certain examinations through the course of your tenure in that field to demonstrate that you remain qualified to be able to practice that profession. Now, namely, I know this to be so true in America. Here, I assume the rules are similar. I imagine maybe even more so strict than what we have in America. But the idea is that, for example, professionals in industries, for example, in healthcare, for example, in law, in other industries, you have to continuously continue your education to demonstrate your commitment to that industry. And what we realize is when we take a look at how society is structured, our society, the way it's generally developed, is designed to say that if I've started my process of education, my goal of education is to attain a certain level, and then after that, it's sufficient for me to survive in the world, and that's it. That active learning for an individual, a common individual in society, ends at the age of maybe 24, 25. Beyond that, there's no obligation, there's no restriction, there's no limitation that says that I need to continue to educate myself. Unless if you submit yourself to a field that gives you a distinguishment among society as a whole. That for the higher level that I hold myself to because of my profession, I have to continue my process of education. That because of the professional character that I want to maintain, my education has to be a continuous process. Now look at yourselves in the eyes of Islam and look at yourself in the eyes of being a Muslim. That is the education that I gain about my faith sufficient once I finish madrasa? I go through the process of Sundays. Every Sunday I dedicate a few hours, or Saturday. And there you go, there's my education. Ya Allah, after that maybe I'll pick up something from a majlis, maybe I won't. Maybe something will be beneficial for me, maybe something won't be. Does this really align with our values of faith and who we deem ourselves to be as a community and a personality? Does this structure really resemble what it is that we want to characterize ourselves in a fundamental of faith and who we are? Or do we want to see ourselves as amongst the elite of society? The same way a particular professional may find it necessary to maintain his credibility in his profession, that he continues to expose himself to new material, he continues to expose himself to the latest content and development that's in process, that we as Muslimin, I am the one who has been endowed and blessed with the mercy of the truth of understanding who is my Creator and how to attach myself to Him. What is my obligation in my creation? What is my purpose of creation is something that Allah has clarified for me. Let me continue to develop my character and my knowledge base and my understanding, and to have ma'rifah of what Allah wants from me, so that I can correctly fulfill my purpose in creation. Look at how Allah distinguishes this aspect of knowledge in Islam. That He describes and He says, on the day of judgment, when the reward will be given, the reward of the knowledgeable man versus the worshipper will be the difference of 70 levels between the two of them. That the reward for the one who is a scholar, who is knowledgeable, will be 70 levels higher than the one who is abid. Al-alim versus al-abid. Alim will be 70 levels. The one who is knowledgeable will be 70 levels higher than the abid. Where the level between the two of these, one level will be the equivalent of a horse running for 1,000 years. That's one level. And there's 70 of these. And you wonder why? Why is there such a difference? Because the abid in his worship will accept the innovations of shaitan into his faith, whereas the alim has the ability to defend the borders of Islam and protect what is the true message of Islam. We take a look and we see, for example, the command of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, where he says, it is mandatory upon you, talab al-ilm min al-mahdi ila al-lahd, that go and search for knowledge from your cradle to your grave. Islam is telling you, it's not something I'm coming up with looking at modern society, telling you that because modern society dictates itself and the intellectual of modern society appreciates and acknowledges the power of information, that we should be a community that chases after knowledge and information. I'm not coming to you with this. This isn't my opinion. The A'imma taught us this 1400 years ago. They taught us to pursue knowledge and information 1400 years ago. They said, commit yourself to knowledge, educate yourselves. There was a narration, I began the quote from a few nights ago, where Imam Sadiq, he explains, he says that your rizq is something that is guaranteed with such a dhamin, with such a trustworthy individual, that whatever has been guaranteed for you will reach you before you leave this world. Remember? Those who remember, no? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. In case you didn't remember, no, I know all of you remember, but if someone wasn't here and they didn't hear it, where there was a narration that we talked about, that when we talked about the role of chasing wealth in our life, that don't make it a priority in your life. Why? Because Allah who created you also guaranteed that I will provide for you. And that Imam Sadiq is explaining that guarantor who has given you and entrusted your rizq is such a guarantor that you can't miss anything that he has given you. So Imam Sadiq says, don't waste too much effort. Don't spend excessive amounts of effort in chasing wealth, because what is your share is already written and you will get no less than what your share is. But then this narration continues, and we didn't mention the continuation of this narration. He says, but let me tell you, there is something that there is no guarantee about. That knowledge is something that Allah has not guaranteed for you. Rather, the amount of knowledge that you can gain in this life is entirely dependent upon the amount of effort you are willing to put in. So if you are going to chase something in your life, chase knowledge, chase information, chase education, because the more that you chase after it, the more that you can attain. There's no limitation other than your own individual investment on how intelligent and how much information and how much knowledge you can gain about Islam. So when we're talking about application of faith and we're talking about understanding of faith, one of the principles is we have to go through this process of educating ourselves about faith, spending in time and investing from our character about our faith and understanding. Now, you see, Islam is a religion for all people. And it happens that there are over 1 billion, mashallah, Muslimin in the world. And they don't all live in London, right? Sometimes it may seem like there's quite a few of you in London, but really it's a fraction of the population. And they don't have access to the resources you have. They're not literate in some cases. In some cases, the information is too far spread about. There's no access to internet, electricity doesn't work well. In the old days, right? I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago from now. If somebody wanted to pursue knowledge and information and they lived in these villages, there was no real way for them to get knowledge and information. So what they would do is they would go and attend the majalis of Aba Abdullah as the only source that they had an interaction to get that information. As times improved, those who had wealth, they still had the limitation of only the majalis of Aba Abdullah. So some of these people, what they would do is they would hire young boys and they would buy expensive tape recorders. Talking about the 70s and 80s where these things were difficult to get. And what they would do is they would hire this boy and they would make it his responsibility. You will go from town to town where there's majlis, record the majlis and bring it back to me, so that I have access to the knowledge and information that's not available to me. And this boy, it was his job, his only job is that my job is to go out, go to the majlis, sit, record the majlis, bring it back to my employer so that he can get access to it. And this was the only process of education they had about faith in Islam, was to go through this entire system and process. And still till today, there are those individuals who, for lack of the ability to read well, lack of proper education, lack of infrastructure, lack of resources, they don't have the ability to educate themselves well about their faith. My question is, what's your excuse? What's my excuse? We are amongst the best educated Muslimin in the world. We are amongst the Muslimin in the world who have access to the best resources in the world. We are the Muslimin who have access to the best security in the world. That we don't have to fear for our faith, that if we are seen with a book about Ahlul Bayt, it's not that we'll endanger our lives in this process. Why is it that we as a community aren't actively, we as individuals, forget it as a community, individuals, stop putting the responsibility on somebody else, let's look at ourselves. Why aren't we putting the responsibility on ourselves that if I have access to all of these resources, why am I not dedicating more of my time and energy to learn about my faith? Why is it that I am as passive about my faith as the individual who is mudtar, who doesn't have a choice, who doesn't have access to information, who doesn't have access to resources to learn about his faith? Why is there no difference in my caliber in relationship to my faith and my understanding and that individual who doesn't have the resources I have? This process of educating about faith needs to be something that we individually and collectively. And the thing is, don't put the responsibility on the community that the community doesn't do it for me, the community doesn't provide resources. The community will create what the community and what the individuals are utilizing. A community is designed to facilitate the endeavors of the individual. If there's nobody doing this, what is a community going to create for you? It's not priority. A community's job is to facilitate what I see everybody doing individually. Let me create a way that everybody can do it together. So if we're not doing it individually, there's no point in creating a resource in a community. So the question now comes in 3 parts that we want to mention is, how do we now begin the process of change to increase that responsibility of education? And there's two incidents that I want to use. Before we get to them, the first point is that one is the access and exposure to information. Read. But it's not just about reading. There's a difference between reading something and studying something. Start with the process of reading. Start by going back and don't look at contemporary. Contemporary authors may be very useful. They may be very beneficial. But start with the authors that, for example, who they wrote 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 400 years, until today, their word is useful and beneficial in society. That till today, that kalam, that statement, that educational material that was written 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, that's translated and available to you in English. I'm not telling you to go learn Arabic yet. It's available to you. Why aren't we reading it? I know it stood the test of time. I know it's been beneficial, because if it had not been beneficial, somewhere between 300 years ago, 500 years ago, and today, people would have stopped reading it. It would have disappeared from availability. It would have gone away. And when we read, it's not just simply a question of, as I mentioned, there's a difference between reading and studying material. Repeat material. Be conscientious. One of the aspects of education of material is fine. Okay, let's say I only have exposure to the majlis. I don't have the facility to go to other environments to learn. Repeat what you learn. What's the benefit of the majlis that I heard and I can't repeat? I don't remember. It was great to listen to, but ask me about it tomorrow and I have nothing to tell you what I got from it. Practice with your own selves. Practice in your own house. Go back and repeat. Go through intellectually. Create a system for you that you dissect the material you're listening to, that tomorrow, if I want to, I can repeat it. Repeat it to your spouses. Repeat it to your children. When you call your mom and you have nothing to talk about, repeat it to your mom. When I speak to my brother and I have to call him, or I want to call him regularly to keep my sila rahim, repeat it to him. Hey, listen, I sat in the majlis, I heard this. Come through the process of not simply being a passive listener, but someone who is active in the process, that when I sit in a majlis, there is something I need to attain and achieve. And I mentioned this the first night, and we bring back and we conclude on the same point. The second aspect that we want to take a look at is the importance of a teacher, and that how it's very important to find a teacher. And when we go through the idea of discussing the idea of the necessity or the example of a teacher, I don't have to give you the example that's relevant to me, when Allah has given you the example of Nabi Musa alayhi salam. When we read in the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf, from about verse 60 forward, is the conversation of Nabi Musa and his experience with Nabi Khizr. And the beginning of this story, of how it is, right? We know the famous parts of the story, but how did this conversation begin? After Nabi Musa goes to his community and gives them an explanation of some points, one comes to Nabi Musa and, in paraphrasing, says to him, has Allah made anyone more intelligent or more accessible of knowledge than you, O Nabi Musa? And Nabi Musa says, no. Paraphrasing, not literally this statement. Then Nabi Musa shows to the people that I am the one who Allah has ordained with knowledge to such an extent, you can't find someone better than me. Then Allah says, hang on. Let me show you, O Musa, even you need a teacher. And he gives the instruction to Nabi Musa. He says, there's someone who I've put on this earth with some knowledge that is beneficial to you. Go and find him. Nabi Musa says, oh Allah, how shall I find this teacher of mine? He says, oh Musa, take with you a fish. And when that fish escapes from you, then recognize that you have found your teacher. And Nabi Musa says, okay. So he takes a pot, and in the pot he puts the fish. And he says, follow me, let's go. And they begin traveling all the way until they reach where two seas meet, or two rivers meet. And at that point, Nabi Musa stops to take rest. In the process of the sleeping of Nabi Musa, the fish actually managed to slip out of the pot and slip into the river and swim away. The boy forgets to mention this to Nabi Musa. When Nabi Musa wakes up, he says, let's go. He says, okay, let's go. And they start walking, and they keep walking for a lengthy period of time until Nabi Musa says, hey, listen, I'm hungry. Where's the food that we brought? In this instance, the boy turns and he says, oh, I forgot to tell you. The fish got away. And Musa says, what? So let's go back. They retrace their steps and they go back to that river where those two rivers met, and under a tree, they see the personality of Nabi Khizr sitting there. And when they go back, Nabi Musa turns and, he asks permission. He says, Allah has, sent me to you that I want to learn from you. Do I have permission? And some of the explanations that you won't be able to handle it. Nabi Musa says, no, Allah gave you as a teacher. Let me follow you. And we see the example. Nabi Khizr begins his journey with Nabi Musa. They take a ship. When they cross the ship, Nabi Khizr makes a hole, sinks the ship. Nabi Musa says, oh, what'd you do? He says, quiet, wait, be patient. And again, they continue their journey. They come across a young boy. Nabi Khizr strikes him in one blow and kills him. Nabi Musa, based on his intelligence, his intellect, his ability to understand and what he knew, what'd you do? Patience. You don't have patience, stay with me, go. Nabi Musa says, no, I'll be patient. If I make the mistake of calling out and being rude in front of you again, we'll separate. We'll part ways. Nabi Musa says, okay. Continue their journey. They enter a town. They ask people for food. They don't give them food. They're about to leave. They see a wall. The wall is about to fall. Nabi Khizr stops Nabi Musa. They go through. They repair the wall. Now the first two times, Nabi Musa criticized. Oh, why did you do that? That was a bad thing you did. Why did you cause harm to these people? This time Nabi Musa thinks that he's helping Nabi Khizr. This is my own phrasing. This isn't. He says, if you wanted to, you could have gotten paid for that work. Nabi Khizr says, okay, we're done. You go your way, I go my way. He says, now I'll explain to you. He says, I sank the ship because it belonged to some poor people, and there was a zalim hakim who was coming and usurping the property of others. And he would have usurped their boat. I sank the boat so that the usurper wouldn't take it from them. So I protected their property. The second instance, that boy was a sinner. He was someone who was going to become against the religion of Islam, and his parents were pious. So Allah wanted to remove that boy and replace him with someone better. He says, and in the third instance, there was a pious father who passed away, and he had left some wealth under this wall for his children. And if that wall would have fallen now before the children matured, they would have lost that wealth. So I protected the investment of the pious father for his children so that they would be able to get access to it. And at this point, our ways part. The significance in this story, there's a number of different lessons that we can absorb from this story. And we won't mention all of them, otherwise, mashallah, we may be going for a while. One aspect is the need of a teacher. Sometimes you may imagine that you know in the best discretion of your knowledge and ability of what is required of you and what your environment demands of you and what is good for you to do and what is bad for you to do. But sometimes our own perspective is limited to what we are available to understand and learn. A man's view of the world is the limit of his perspective. Sometimes our perspective is limited, our experiences are limited, our understanding is limited. We need teachers, we need educated individuals, we need individuals with a greater perspective than us to educate us of our limitations. This is a monologue situation, right? I speak, you listen. If in the middle you have a question, can you discuss with me in the middle of it? No, as a matter of fact, most people would probably pick you up and put you outside if you start having a conversation with me. This is a passive learning environment. Create for yourself an environment where you can sit with a teacher, an educated individual, where you can sit in a classroom that opens the possibility of dialogue to ask, to understand, to learn. Create for yourself a situation where I am someone who is chasing after knowledge and I have the freedom to correct my perspective and broaden my horizons. The way Allah gives Nabi Musa, Nabi Khizr. How many of us ask Allah, oh Allah, give me a teacher to educate me. Give me a guide to lead me to the right path. Give me a source that will bring me to the benefit that I need in my life and to ensure that my life is passed in a way that you are pleased. The second point that we mentioned within this, that is a lesson for us, is taking a look at applying what you learn. It's not sufficient for me just to listen to a story. How do I bring that item to application in my life? How do I begin the appropriate application of knowledge that I have? That knowledge which I am not applying is useless to me, is a burden upon me. I have to begin the process of applying information as I receive it and practicing that information. Part of what allows us to do that is that we create a positive environment around us that promotes not just learning, but shares my direction in life. That when I learn something new or I'm benefiting, I have good examples around me that are following this example. I have good ideals in front of me that when I am tired of applying something new, I get support and positive reinforcement from my surroundings. To be intelligent and careful of your surroundings, and we've mentioned this throughout the nights of how important it is to create a good positive learning environment. The next is to recognize we don't know everything. That at times we will come across information that we may not know, and that's okay. I don't have to fight or be contrary to something that I don't know about. Let me learn about things that may disagree with my perspective or my information. Look at Nabi Musa, for example. The taking of a life. The sinking of someone's ship. In the apparent and quick nature of Nabi Musa, yes, in the apparent from what his limited knowledge was, this was something that was not according to him that was good, which is why he questioned Khizr. He did not acknowledge and understand that Khizr is the teacher, that Khizr has greater knowledge than him, that Khizr knows what Musa knows and then some, that's why he's the teacher. Sometimes we make this mistake. The second we find someone who disagrees with us, he doesn't know anything. Don't waste your time with this one. Acknowledge that if someone has the position of a teacher, then maybe they have information and awareness that is beyond our perspective, and to submit ourselves to the authority of that instructor. The next is submit yourself to reality, meaning acknowledge the fact that sometimes what I think is right and what I want to do is not exactly what's the best. We take a look, for example, sometimes when we take a look at even in the story of Nabi Khizr, look at how Nabi Musa submits himself to the reality. The first time he found conflict, and Nabi Khizr says, this is too much for you. Nabi Musa says, no, I won't do it again. The second time he did it, again Nabi Musa conflicted. He said, wait, let me stay. The third time he conflicted, did he keep repeating, no, give me one more chance. Give me one more chance. One more. No. He acknowledged the fact that his information was limited, and once he hit his limit, he acknowledged that, okay, now me pursuing this is stubbornness, rather there's a lesson I need to collect, let me collect and absorb that lesson, and then we'll move forward. Then I'll come to Allah again and ask Him for further guidance. Now, this is one short abridged aspect of some of the lessons that when you go to learn, how it is that we need to learn, how it is that we need to process information. The second aspect that we take a look at is, where did the teacher come from? It came from Allah. Allah appointed that teacher. That's one of the aspects of gaining knowledge, is not simply about sitting in front of books. The statement from our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, where he says, knowledge is not the sitting in front of books and excessively reading of books, but it is the light that Allah places in the heart of the mu'mineen. That there is some aspect of knowledge that you have the ability to attain yourself, but you also need the wasila and the help from Allah to be able to attain and absorb that knowledge and grow. And Allah is the one who tells you, where He says, وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. When we talked about this, and we talked about this in the Ayah of Nas, where we talked about how Allah creates the soul, and Allah is telling you that إِنَّ الرُّوحَ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ رَبِّهِ وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. That the knowledge that you have comes from Allah, and Allah is telling you, I did not give you much of my knowledge except a little bit. We take a look in Ayat al-Kursi where Allah is telling, and He says, وَلَا يُحِيطُونَ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا بِمَا شَاءَ. That they can't take anything from His knowledge except by His permission. Look at the verse that we began our conversation with, where our holy Prophet Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, he's saying, قُلْ رَبِّي زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Oh Allah, increase in my knowledge. There's 2 points in this. One is the aspect that even, mashallah, our Prophet is asking Allah for more knowledge. That who are we to think that our knowledge is sufficient in our lives? The second, how old was our Prophet during the time of revelation? It was over 40 years, right? 40 to 63, 23 years. Was our Prophet a young man when he's making this dua to Allah? Oh Allah, increase my knowledge. Was he a boy? Was he a grown, mature man? Don't imagine the process of asking for knowledge and receiving knowledge is the endeavor of the youthful. Our Prophet, Habibullah, was still asking Allah for knowledge, was still pursuing knowledge, was still looking to learn. There is no age that you will reach at which you have exceeded the need and the necessity of asking Allah for knowledge and benefit. We have to keep going back and asking Allah, and we have to keep pursuing this knowledge, whether we are 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever age we reach. Continue this process. Continue this process of learning as set in the example by our Holy Prophet himself. Finally, in the aspect of this majlis, very quickly, this majlis is not just the only source, it should not be the only source of knowledge that you have, rather it's an introduction to the flavor of knowledge. There's no way, no matter how much a scholar or a lecturer wants to give you information, that he can give you every aspect of information or complete an entire perspective of knowledge for you. Understand that this is an introduction to knowledge, and that after this is the individual's endeavors that he should go and look for more information on those topics and educate himself, to understand that there are greater pieces of information out there for him and he has a greater responsibility. In one aspect, it's a source of knowledge. In another aspect, it's a source of motivation and correction of character and behavior. That we come to this majlis as a source of reformation for us, that maybe there are flaws within us, mistakes that we are making in the environment that we live in that is preventing us from continuing our path down the path of Islam and reaching Allah, that utilize this majlis as a source of reformation for ourselves. The third is use this as a reflection of the love of Ahlul Bayt. And it's a place for us to develop the love of Ahlul Bayt. The idea that when we come here, it's not just simply that, okay, I'll learn something new, but also that I come here for the love of the children of Zahra. And that I want that love to be increased and grown. These Marsiya that we recite, or Latmiya, or the Noha that we recite, this is not something that is new. That this is an aspect of developing and growing and connecting with the love of Ali Muhammad. When we take a look and we see that even the time of our 8th Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Radha alayhi salam, he used to request that elegies of Aba Abdullah be recited before him. He used to tell them, come and recite out of the love of my father Hussein, that I may listen to that poetry that you recite. What makes you think you and I are better than Imam Radha, that when this poetry is recited we don't need to be here, we don't need to listen to it, there's no benefit in it for us? No, it's a reflection of the love of Ali Muhammad. And if we don't grow this love and this knowledge correctly, sometimes we can wind up down the wrong path. In history, we take a look and see that after the shahadat of our 7th Imam, there were some people who denied the wilayat and the imamat of Imam al-Radha alayhi salam. And they made the excuse, they came forward and they said, you can't be the next Imam, because when your father died, he was in Kadhmiya and you were in Medina. And we know that the Imam, look at how they abused their knowledge, and they abused what little information they had, and they moved in the wrong direction. They said, we know that the Imam has to be present to bury the last Imam. So you were in Medina, your father was in Kadhmiya, there's no way you could be the next Imam because you weren't in Kadhmiya at the time of his shahadat. You weren't there, we did not see you. Imam Radha turns to them and he says, then let me ask you something. Who was it that buried my father Hussein in Karbala? And they said, that was by the miracle of Allah that Imam Zainul Abidin came to bury him. He says, then by that same miracle, I am the one who was present to bury my father. But what is the shahadat of Aba Abdullah and what is the burial of Aba Abdullah? How a difficult time that was. That the body of Aba Abdullah and his family lay out under the open sun in the field of Karbala. Under that sun that was too hot for Asghar, that Aba Abdullah covered him with his cloak. Now they left Aba Abdullah in the middle of the desert in that condition, without any clothing, without any cover. They had desecrated his body in such a way that they left nothing, and the people were too afraid of this army to come and help him, that for 3 days Aba Abdullah was under the open sun in the field of Karbala. They said that on the 3rd day the Banu Asad came to bury Aba Abdullah, but when you bury someone you recognize them by their face. There were no faces or heads left to recognize them by. That the Banu Asad stood there and they did not know, who do we bury where, how do we bury these personalities, we can't even recognize them. In the distance they saw a rider coming towards them and they hid out of fear that maybe these were the supporters of Yazid who would try and persecute them for their support of the Imam. So they went and they hid until this rider arrived, and then they saw it was Imam Ali ibn Husayn Zainul Abidin, who said, come out and help me. I have come to give you instruction to bury my relatives and my family. Imam Zainul Abidin is the one who took the responsibility to create the graves of the Shuhadah, to create the graves and put them in their graves. That after he had finished, then he turned and he said, don't touch this remainder body, this is the body of my father Aba Abdullah. I will bury him with my own hands. They said, Imam Zainul Abidin, when he was finishing the burial of his father, the Banu Asad came, they said, we now understand who these bodies are and you have taught us well, but there is this one piece of flesh that we don't know who it belongs to. What should we do with this piece of flesh? Imam Zainul Abidin says, this is the body of my brother Asghar. When they ran over the bodies and desecrated them in Karbala, everyone had a relative except for my father and my brother Asghar. So they trampled him in the body of my brother Asghar. When Imam Zainul Abidin prepares to bury the body of this Asghar, a call comes out from the grave of Abu Abdullah, Ali, place him upon my chest and let him sleep with me. That Mazloom Abu Abdullah, even in this condition, he called out for his infant son Asghar to be placed on his chest, even till today. When you go to Abu Abdullah in Karbala, may Allah give us all permission, when you stand at the grave of Abu Abdullah, remember there lays this headless orphan on the chest of Abu Abdullah. That when you need a wasila to ask Allah, say, Ya Allah, by this Mazloom, by that infant that was trampled, that sleeps on the chest of Hussein, Allah, take the wasila of that Asghar. After Imam Zainul Abidin had continued and finished the burial of his father and his brothers, he went and they said, we saw Imam Zainul Abidin do something different. He went out to the trees and he came back clutching something to his chest. And again we saw him go in a different direction, and he went and he came back clutching something to his chest. We said, Yabna Rasulullah, what is this that you have? He says, these are the arms of my uncle Abbas that I have gone and collected. They said, we saw Imam Zainul Abidin go and make the grave of Abu al-Fadl. In history they say that Abu al-Fadl was a very tall man, but they say that when the grave was made, if you get to go and see the actual grave of Abu al-Fadl, that it's a very small grave. They asked the question that this disparity doesn't make sense. Tariq says he was tall. His grave that we can see is very small. They said that they had cut up the limbs of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas so much that a small grave was made for him because of how they had desecrated his body. They said, we saw Imam Zain al-Abidin gather the body parts of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam, and then we saw him dig the grave. We saw him individually bring down the body into the grave, and we stood and we watched. But after a long period of time had passed, we saw that Imam Zain al-Abidin did not come out of the grave after the burial. We became worried that maybe something had happened to him. Maybe something was wrong. So when we went forward to look, we saw our Imam. He had wrapped himself to the body of Abu al-Fadl and he was crying profusely, "Oh uncle, if you would see the condition of the Haram of Rasul now. Oh uncle, you left us in the greatest of difficulties." They said, we saw Imam Zain al-Abidin hugging the body of Abu al-Fadl and weeping for the masa'ib of the women in Kufa, for weeping for the difficulties of Zainab in Kufa, saying, "Uncle, you left us at such a difficult time. We are going through such trials. Oh uncle, if you would have been alive to be our support at this time." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا وأي منقلب ينقلبون. On this final night, let's raise our hands in dua. Ya Mahmud bihaqqi Muhammad, Ya A'la bihaqqi Ali, Ya Fatir as-samawat bihaqqi Fatima, Ya Muhsin bihaqqi al-Hasan, Ya Qadim al-Ahsan bihaqqi al-Husain. Oh Allah, accept this small ibadat from us. Oh Allah, forgive our sins and cover our flaws. Oh Allah, those who have come here with hajat by the mention of Bab al-Hawa'ij and the difficulties of Ahlul Bayt, fulfill their hajat. Oh Allah, those who are in difficulty by the difficulties of Abu Abdullah, remove their difficulties. Oh Allah, there are those amongst our community, our family, our friends, and the mu'mineen around the world who are sick. By the right of the one who is sick in Karbala, by the right of my Mazloom Imam, give them shifa. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of our Master. Oh Allah, give us the strength that we may be his upright supporters. Oh Allah, protect our lineages and make them the upright supporters of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Fatiha. Matem Hussein.